And now we are coming to the end of our program with someone who asked to go last, right, Lisa? And she is very accomplished and a former poet laureate of the state of Rhode Island, and we're happy to have her. Lisa.
So I thought I'd finish this up with some Mary Oliver. None of the readers knew until we got the program late yesterday or this morning what everybody was going to be reading. So I just said, I want to read Mary Oliver. And then I thought, no matter where we start or where we go, which has been so beautiful and synchronistic in the way that loves to happen, I was leaning on that tree, thinking about the giving tree and the stump and the old man watching you thumb through Shel Silverstein. And when I'm going to read Susan, that March Piercy poem is so beautiful. Mary Oliver says in one of her essays, she says, "May I be the tiniest nail in the house of the universe, but may I be useful." So that's our great Mary. For those of you who aren't familiar with her, it's time. I had the great fortune through my friend Coleman Barks, who you may or may not know. He's the translator of the great Middle Eastern poet Jalaluddin Rumi, and he's also my best friend. So through a wonderful series, Mary went from being my hero to my great friend. So I'm gonna read two of her poems, one of mine. This first poem, everybody knows The Summer's Day, and most people know Wild Geese. Not a lot of people know this poem. It was very important to Mary. In particular, at the end of her life, I was visiting with her, and a line from the poem came back to her, and she couldn't remember all the words. So we went through all of her copies of her books on her shelf, and she found it in my tattered copy of her new and selected poems, which she didn't have a copy of. It's called Singapore. It's also about being of use. But before I go on, because I will read these poems and then we'll just mingle, I do want to thank you so much, Christine. I want to thank every educator here and every librarian. I mean, librarians need our funding. They're lifesavers. They save lives. I live in Westerly. We have a library that saves people's lives, in particular, people that don't have a home to go to. They can find one in the library. So thank you. And I wanted her to make another sales pitch, but make a donation again on the way back out. What's $10, for God's sake? Singapore. In Singapore, in the airport, a darkness was ripped from my eyes. In the women's restroom, one compartment stood open. A woman knelt there washing something in the white bowl. Disgust argued in my stomach, and I felt in my pocket for my ticket. A poem should always have birds in it. Kingfishers say, with their bold and gaudy wings. Rivers are pleasant, of course. Trees, a waterfall, or if that's not possible, a fountain rising and falling. A person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem. When the woman turned, I could not answer her face. Her beauty and her embarrassment struggled together, and neither could win. She smiled, and I smiled. What kind of nonsense is this? Everybody needs a job. Yes, a person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem. But first, we must watch her as she stares down at her labor, which is dull enough. She is washing the tops of the airport ashtrays, as big as hubcaps, with a blue rag. Her small hands turn the metal, scrubbing and rinsing. She does not work slowly nor quickly, but like a river. Her dark hair is like the wing of a bird. I don't doubt for a moment that she loves her life, and I want her to rise up from the crust and the slop and fly down to the river. This probably won't happen, but maybe it will. If the world were only pain and logic, who would want it? Of course it isn't. Neither do I mean anything miraculous, but only the light that can shine out of a life. I mean the way she unfolded and refolded the blue cloth, the way her smile was only for my sake. I mean the way this poem is filled with trees and birds. So here's a little poem I wrote about my friends Mary and Coleman. I realized today on the drive here when I was thinking about it that this was actually the last outing that Coleman and Mary had together. He visited her 2 more times in Florida, but she was pretty bedridden by then. So this is one of the final poems. My daughter said, "You better not call me out," and I didn't make any promises, but she is making a small appearance tonight, and she makes one in this poem. Poem's called Bear With Me, and it has an epigraph by A.A. Milne. So bear with me. The epigraph is, "We'll be friends forever, won't we, Pooh?" asked Piglet. "Longer than that," Pooh said. Bear with me while I try to describe the sight of Mary's arm tucked into Coleman's, the two of them taking such small and concentrated steps due to the fragility or the neuropathy. Or is it just the grace of God? Her arm in his, their slow and steady footsteps to the car from the restaurant, his low murmur, her unbridled laugh. Easy now. The 3 of us walked behind them. My daughter said, "They're adorable." My friend said, "I can't take it." I said, "Pooh and Piglet." And so they seemed, big old gentle bear, tiny fierce friend bundled in pink beside him, bolstered by each other for whatever wind comes next. The 3 of us watched as they inched toward the car, Mary's head resting lightly against his arm, holding hers. We watched love take careful steps, one at a time, and we followed. Way, way, way longer than forever. Easy now. Here's one more poem of Mary's. It's called In Blackwater Woods. We had, those of you sitting there might still see that green in that tree, and there's one over there, but I've been, of course, looking up at them all day. I think most poems, implicitly have in them the word look. I think that's the first word of every poem. Mary Oliver, who most people think of as so shy and timid, had the audacity to actually say it in this poem. Like, listen, guys. So this is called In Blackwater Woods. She says, "Look, the trees are turning their own bodies into pillars of light, are giving off the rich fragrance of cinnamon and fulfillment. The long tapers of cattails are drifting and floating away over the blue shoulders of the ponds, and every pond, no matter what its name is nameless now. All my life, everything I have ever learned comes down to this, to the fires in the black river of loss, whose other side is salvation, whose meaning none of us will ever know. To live in this world, you must be able to do 3 things. To love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it. And when the time comes to let it go, to let it go." So I meant to talk about grief and how could we have a reading without a little death brought in. It's such a part of the cycle of life. I think Mary talks about it so beautifully. And her presence in my life is just as strong, if not stronger now, that I don't have to get on a plane to go see her. So for all of us coming out of a year of isolation, many of us losing friends, losing family members, and not being able to grieve in a proper way, which is a tribal way, which is beating your chest and saying it really, really hurts to lose somebody you love. We're all carrying that with us too, in addition to our gratitude and our joy at being able to step out in this beautiful world. So I'll take that cycle full circle and finish with just a short poem of my own was called Just Before Summer when I wrote it. And it was that week, that's the last week of school. My kids are 14 months apart and they used to fight so badly in the morning. They shared a bedroom and a bunk bed. But as we slugged through those last 2 weeks of school in June, they were too tired to even fight. And this one morning, they were so quiet, I was certain my son had killed her. And I ran into the bedroom, like, what did you do to her? That's a tiny scene from the book. So I'm retitling it. Instead of Just Before Summer, it's called First Week of Summer. The sun is shining on the water, not like so many diamonds, but like the sun on the water. My children, slow to wake, bodies and minds tired, murmur together, looking for socks. I mistake them for angels, but it is no mistake. This June day stretches into its thickness of color. Green reaches for greener. Blue inhales slowly, exhales bluer. Yellow wraps itself around the morning like a shawl. Nothing more to say. Just yes, or oh, or